Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Sound Bites. This week we have Liz Clarke. She's a technical marketing manager at Nitta Gelatin, and she also has a background in food science, and she's a food scientist. So I think it's a really interesting industry that you're in because you're in one of the fields where everybody has to eat, and I feel like not a lot of people really understand what goes into what you do. But it sounds really interesting, and I'm ready to learn more.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks you guys so much for having me. I love talking about food science, love talking about what I'm doing now, which is kind of, very much related to food science. So yeah, basically, I am a technical marketing manager for the North American arm of a Japanese ingredient company. So you kind of wonder, like, how did you get here? That's a very
How'd you get
random thing.
there?
Yeah.
Where did you start? What are your roots in this field?
Yeah. So really my interest started probably when I was like a little kid. Like I loved baking, I loved recipes, and I liked taking it kind of like the next step forward. So I'd try to like make my own recipes and then work backwards to do like the nutritional panels on them, which is a really weird thing to
That's
do.
when we knew. That was a sign, Liz.
Yeah. So
This was the field for
I
you.
was probably about 12, and I loved the grocery store, and I still do, and so does my mom. And like we would go to the grocery store and just like turn everything over, look at it, read it. So I've always just been really, really interested in food and nutrition. And so I thought, after I probably took about a good 3 years, not sure what I wanted to do. So I like dabbled in accounting, did the community college thing, just really floated for a while. And I kind of landed on nutrition because I was like, oh, there's some math there, there's some science there. Still super interested in food. And so I thought, well, the natural progression would be to, be like a registered dietitian or a nutritionist. So I started down that path at NC State. And then about a year into it, it was like, oh, well, you get all this information from your clients, you get all this data, but people like to lie about what they're eating or what they're not eating. And so I think I really grappled with that. I was like, we can have all these great studies and great recommendations and make really nutritious food, but then like, are people going to eat it? That's a whole nother thing. So during that same time, I'd start taking some food science classes, and I'd never heard of food science before. I mean, it seems like a weird like juxtaposition, like food science, like just, I don't know.
Didn't feel natural, yeah.
It didn't feel natural. I still think we should have a better word for it because nobody knows what it is unless you're in the field. But
Right.
but I loved it, and it was basically all about food chemistry, like what is food actually made of? Food microbiology, like how do you make it stay safe, or how do you brew beer or make sauerkraut, or just basically how all these things are made and what's in them. And there's also some, a good bit of nutrition in there too. So kind of knowing, what should people be eating, understanding the ins and outs of those things. So I ended up getting my bachelor's in food science, and I loved it so much that I continued. I went and got my master's in food science at Virginia Tech. So I really focused on foodborne illness, which is so weird. I loved microbiology, and I should have gone into the brewing part of it because it's so much cooler. But instead I did foodborne illness, which was really interesting because it was epidemiology, but a lot of GI troubles. And
Not you personally, you just learned about them.
yeah, like just it's funny, like knowing the incubation time for like salmonella before the diarrhea sets in is a funny thing to know. But
Do you bring that up in parties like a few minutes in, or do you wait a little bit?
I wait a little bit, but it is really funny though, because I get so many texts from friends about like, hey, is this safe to eat? Like, this is the expiration date, or I had like a stomach issue. I ate this. What was that? What it was? And I never really know, of course. but I can, usually narrow it down like, oh, well, that sounded like it was
Hypothesize.
viral. That was a rapid onset there. So
And it's a pretty fascinating field to be in, especially today, because I think people in general have a really interesting relationship with food, like good and bad, right? And I think we're so detached from where our food actually comes from and what the origins of that are. You mentioned like sauerkraut and brewing, like
mhm.
basically fermenting in general is taking what you have and turning it into what you want. But the origins of that coming from being able to preserve foods for longer periods of time and like what actually happens at the microbiology level, it's
Yeah.
just really interesting. And I think most people just don't know where that comes from or what it is. Or again, to your point, what's safe? Like, can
Hmm.
I eat this one week expired yogurt? Like, it's probably
Yes.
okay.
The
It's
answer
fermented.
is yes.
That's good to know. That's good to know.
If it's fermented and it's not like fuzzy,
Yeah.
you're probably okay. Like,
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good rule of thumb, actually. Very good, very good. Unless it's making CO2, it's probably pretty happy, and who know, you might get drunk off it if not. So, kind of a win-win
It's a win-win.
situation.
yeah,
But
yeah, you might as well just swing for it. Go for it.
but I think that's such a really, really good point is because we are in general disconnected from our food, unless you are a farmer or in the food industry. There's also a lot of like mistrust and just a crazy amount of fear, which I think the industry has put on itself a lot.
Hmm.
Like I love like I did an internship at a dairy, and that was like 15 years ago. I mean, it was a while ago. And I remember just it like all the milk jugs would say, cows not treated with growth hormones, and, our milk never has growth hormones. And I was like, what's the deal with the growth hormones? Like, is anybody using this? And they're like, oh, no, no, nobody's been using that for, decades and decades in the US. We like to let everybody know they're not in there. I'm like, I get it, but like that also scares people. So if they see milk that doesn't say that, like, oh,
Yeah,
are there hormones in that milk? So
yeah.
I think we've kind of, not that there aren't things that you shouldn't eat or things to be concerned about, but I think as an industry we might have kind of shot ourselves in the foot by labeling so much like free of gluten, free of hormones, free of things that inherently would maybe not even be in the product.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, and I mean, I could go on for years about GMOs, but um, they're not inherently bad. We've never had a study that actually said that they're not to say we couldn't find it. That's the whole thing about science is that you're always learning
Always searching.
more. But right now it's like, well, for many cases, the pros far outweigh the cons, but people are scared of them. And, things with acronyms are scary because people don't really understand what they are.
We run into that in our industry a lot. That a lot of times people will use the big words or they'll use the acronyms and they think that's impressing the person on the other side, but really it's intimidating someone on the other side, and it ends up talking you out of a project or deal because they
Yeah.
just don't understand.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, I guess it's almost good that we as humans are leery of, new things. It's kept our societies going for a long time, and, kept the hands out of the fire and things like that. But yeah, I think transparency is really, really important, and
Mhm.
education too, which that's a lot easier said than done, I think, probably for every industry.
Do you think the nutrition industry or the food industry, it's I think a lot of folks are not scientists or obviously food scientists by trade. And so it's sort of like pop science and they read this article online and they're
Yeah.
like, GMO is bad. And so then the food industry sort of has to react to that
Hmm.
so they don't lose profit and so they can keep selling their products. Are you seeing a lot of that? Is that
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I think that's probably something that's always been around, but as I wasn't in the industry really before the internet, but I think it's probably only made it a lot worse. In a way, it's good because it's pushed for transparency, which I think is always important. But yeah, I mean, you can get one blogger misinterpreting even a poorly done study and that whole ingredient can get kicked out of Whole Foods,
Wow.
and then it's a ripple effect. So one of the, I can name ingredients like off the top of my head who kind of got like a bad rap. And I mean, it devastated those industries, at least in North America, for years and years and years. And it takes a long time to, come back from something like that. And, misinformation in all fields is a very is a very real thing. And, food is so personal. And so I work in food now, but also very heavily in like the dietary supplement industry, because we have ingredients that are both like, we have like physically functional ingredients, and then we have biologically functional or physiologically functional ingredients. And so those go more into the dietary supplement industry. And, it's, if you're ingesting something or you're giving something to your kids, it's super personal, but it also gives people this false sense that they understand,
Right.
and, sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. And I think it's just up to the industry to try to educate. And that's why I like the fact that, I did development for B2C before. So I was like basically formulating or making recipes for brands like, they were mostly snack brands, but Orville Redenbacher, Snack Factory pretzels. I did some healthy choice meals, which those were actually really, really fun. But it's hard because, you're working towards a brand that uses all different ingredients. And of course you can have like your brand characteristics that we stick with this or we stick with that, or we operate within, certain nutritional guidelines. But I love that right now on B2B, it's like laser focused. So my company in North America only sells gelatin and collagen peptides. And like, that is it. And gelatin's more like, people know how to use gelatin generally, within the industry. You got your gummy bears, you got your gel caps, super, super useful, but not like highly technical. But the collagen peptides actually are really technical with a lot. I mean, the difference between a commodity collagen and like a really high-end clinically studied ingredient is very different. And I like that we get to focus on that, and we get to really focus on educating our customers, and also, hopefully educating consumers, because you can't, when things, the more complicated they get, I feel like the more narrow it should be to be able to like tackle it well.
I feel
And
like
nuance doesn't travel well with a headline,
Yeah.
right? So like trying to be able to explain that is so tough. And then you mentioned kind of someone might interpret something a little differently or poorly interpret something. And again, in data world, you see that a lot. If something is going from 2% to 4%, you could interpret that as a 2% increase.
Mm-hmm.
You could also interpret that as a 100% increase.
Mm-hmm.
So you can be disingenuous by the way a label is there, or end up propagating information that might not be telling the whole story. It's tough. It's really tricky.
For sure.
I'm curious to know what some applications of collagen peptides are, because I feel like it's a really trendy ingredient right now. I'm seeing in a lot of influencers putting it in their smoothies and in their coffees in the morning. So I feel like it's a really cool product that you're making. So what are some interesting applications, or what are the benefits of it too?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll give you probably more than you ever wanted to know about that, because I love my collagen peptides too, because I'm a like avid consumer of them. But yeah, so when I started with my company about 6 years ago, and as I said, it's our headquarters is in Japan. So for training, they're like, you and your colleagues go over to Japan. And I remember them saying, oh, what are the most popular products? What are the most popular applications in North America? And I just, like, my director of R&D and I just looked at each other and we're like, nobody knows what collagen peptides are. Like, because just 6 years ago, literally nobody did in North America, or it was a very, 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 very small population.
Like niche in California, New York.
Yeah, exactly. And it's been a really, really fun ride over the past 6 years. And I really count myself very fortunate to have like been there and gotten to see that growth, because I think by like maybe 2018 or something. It was voted like hot ingredient of the year by, all these trade publications, and it just absolutely exploded. So collagen peptides, basically, they are a functional protein. They're really, really unique. They're a natural protein. So they're found in the connective tissues of animals, fish, us. And they're one of the few proteins naturally occurring that actually has hydroxyproline in it. So that's an amino acid, and it's just not very common in plants. I mean, you would really have to minuscule amounts in plants, basically. So it's really unique, and it can signal your own cells basically to, when you are ingesting these collagen peptides, you get these smaller peptides. Usually it's like di and tripeptides. They enter your bloodstream, and what we think is happening, and there's been a lot of research over the past like 2 decades on this, but what we think is happening is that it's signaling your cells that, oh no, my collagen is breaking down within my body because I've got these dipeptides in my bloodstream that usually aren't there. So then your body tries to ramp up its own collagen production in response to this. And if you keep on taking it, it keeps on happening. And collagen naturally decreases, unfortunately, quite a lot. I think it starts in about your 20s, and then it's like by the time you're 50, that's why 20-year-olds and 50-year-olds, look a little different, because the skin gets saggier, your hair gets thinner, your nails get thinner. It's just kind of the way things are. So anyway.
Michael and I were talking about, like, basically after 35, you're just waiting to die, right? Like,
you're
just falling apart after that.
It's a rapid decline. I'm about to turn 36, and I'm happy that I have my collagen peptides. But yeah, I mean, it's different than when I was 26, and that's just the way the world works. But yeah, so it's really cool that it's like, and it's not just your skin, it's also your bones. Collagen is the most plentiful protein in your bones as well. It plays a big role in joints and joint cells, as well as synovial fluid, so like buffering those joints. So it's like, I mean, it's a really important part of your body. And by ingesting collagen peptides, you can kind of program your body to look a little younger, feel a little bit younger for a longer period of time. So yeah, we've seen everybody jumping on the bandwagon though. So it's been interesting. You'll see a lot of like vegan collagen out there. There's only one company that makes a very, very, very tiny amount of real vegan collagen, and that's through precision fermentation, which is a whole nother beast.
It's a whole nother podcast.
Whole nother podcast. Very interesting stuff. But they're barely even commercializing it. So I would say with, 99.99999% accuracy, any of your vegan collagen products really, they don't contain collagen. And the way they can kind of get around that is because usually somewhere on the bottle, very, very small, and not always, it'll say booster. And so it's basically, it has other ingredients that can be super, beneficial, hyaluronic acid, biotin, different vitamins, which are known to help in collagen synthesis.
Got it.
Not as effectively as actual collagen protein, but,
And I don't know a ton in this space, but like a lot of times when you're trying to get supplements that are typically found in meat products and you're trying to substitute them with vegetable-based products, you need acres and acres and acres of land associated with that product to produce what you might be able to get as a byproduct or secondary product of one animal, right? Like just the amount of space and water. So what might initially look like being sustainable probably isn't when you think about the inputs of water and land required to extract that chemical.
Yeah, that is such a good point. And I think that's something to keep in mind. I mean, I understand some people want to avoid animal products or specific animal products for different reasons. But if you're looking just purely on sustainability, I'd agree that it's really hard to compete with the sustainability of traditionally harvested collagen protein, because basically, I like to say that no animal's ever slaughtered for collagen,
Yeah.
ever. I mean, they are slaughtered for the meat. That's number one. So once the meat goes, you have, I mean, it doesn't sound super appetizing, but it's the truth. You have skin and you have bone, and do you want to throw that stuff away, or do you want to, clean it up and extract every bit of
As
useful
much as you
material
can.
from it? Yeah. So it's really utilizing the whole animal to get a product that is extremely value added and very, very nutritionally beneficial. So that's why I see certainly competition from vegan collagen sources, and some people that might be their only option, in which case, it's probably not real collagen, but it might have some benefit to you. I don't want to knock it. But, those materials, unless we all decide to stop eating meat tomorrow and stop using leather, those materials are still going to be, are going to be there. So, and it's part of the circular economy too, which is pretty cool. So like once those, food grade materials, once the collagen is extracted and processed and everything from there, the output is actually like crude protein and chemicals, but they're chemicals that can be used for fertilizer, and it's protein that goes into animal feed. So it kind of like recirculates through the value chain, which is really cool.
Yeah, because even if you are like, you still need grazing animals regardless, and that's and their byproduct is going to be turned into fertilizers, which you need to then grow a healthy farm, right? So like all those inputs on a well balanced farm are fantastic. I think like when you see factory chicken farming, I think that's a different animal, different discussion altogether.
Yeah, I
But when
think
you have,
balance is definitely important, and a lot of times things are certainly out of balance, in all industries. So it's good to be like very aware of that.
I'm curious how, since you've sort of been on the ground floor of the popularity of collagen peptides, like how is marketing to it now changed versus when you first started? Is it less education than in the beginning, and so there's more
Yeah.
acceptance?
So it actually has really, really turned out in our favor, which is good. Again, before it was just, people saying, "We want collagen. Do you have collagen?" And us generally saying, "Yes, we do, but it's certainly not the
So much
cheapest. We
collagen.
have so much." And then they're like, "Well, we want the cheapest collagen." So that's challenging. We are a Japanese company. We're a very science-based company, and really we're like some of the thought leaders in the beginning of this. I mean, it's a very mature market in Japan, so we've had a lot of time to do the research and optimize the products, do the clinical research, and we all know how expensive that is. So a lot of times we just were not at the beginning very price competitive, because it was like people were like, "I want a car," and we're like, "Well, we have Cadillacs," and they're like, "No, just any car will do." But it's been great, because especially within the past couple, I'd say 2 years, as the market has gotten more saturated, it's also become more specialized, and consumers are getting a lot more savvy and getting more educated, and they're now looking for products that have clinical substantiation. They're looking for products that check really, really, really specific boxes, and that's great, because that's exactly where my company plays. So it's actually worked out really well that it has been more education, but it's exciting because, my R&D team in Japan has been doing this for such a long time. So I have this like library of, 30 years of knowledge to pull from. So I consider myself really lucky, because they make my job, a lot easier.
A little bit easier.
Yeah, because they've been doing it. And even with the trends, it's interesting to see, collagen in beverages. That was going on 10 years ago in Japan, and we just thought that was the craziest thing. Like, a collagen in beer, this is nuts, and now we see collagen in beverages everywhere, so it's interesting.
Are there any trends in Japan that you're sort of seeing now play out that you're like, oh, maybe a few years from now in the US, we'll do something like this?
Yeah, it's really it's kind of funny because I feel like it's almost gone full circle there.
Mm.
And now they're putting collagen in just really everyday foods,
Hmm.
because I feel like right now it's still kind of specialty supplements, that either they're already in a gummy or already in a liquid that you add to water, or the tubs that are so popular because it's versatile. You can put it in your coffee,
Mm-hmm.
put as much as you want, put as little as you want. So that's what we see here. But there, it's like they're just adding it to like bottled tomato juice and yogurt and salad dressing. They're just literally like putting it in everything, which is cool. And maybe that's where we will be. I mean, I don't know. It's so interesting. Like, I haven't gotten to go to Japan for a while, and I think it'll probably be a while until I go back, just with the whole, COVID and everything. But they're definitely ahead of us on some things. Like, even this is like a side note, but I thought the women's fashion was so crazy when I went there. And basically it's like what people are wearing now.
Everyone's wearing now.
Here, yeah.
Sure.
I was like,
Yeah.
these sweaters are so baggy. I don't understand. But now I'm like,
why are these jeans not skinny jeans?
yes,
Oh,
yes.
they're
The jeans,
looser.
were the
Mhm.
cropped and wide jeans. And yeah, I just didn't know what to think, but here we are.
So for you doing like B2B marketing, and you get a kind of a gauge and insight into what's happening, what the possibilities are, and what the limits are. You probably have a really interesting role in creating that awareness with your end customer of what's possible,
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of not trying to jam it down their throat, right? But like, hey, this is the art of the possible,
Yeah.
and this is what you can do.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I mean we have a really account-based marketing strategy, and it's just so personal, which I really like. I mean, also you have to look at how big your team is. If I was given these huge swaths of data, I just literally probably wouldn't have the time to go through it, even though it would probably be very useful if I could. But it's really getting to know your customer and your customer's brands, and also, what kind of what's their end customer, I mean, because you don't want something to be over someone's head, or confusing, or misleading. But I think that's also where it's really interesting, where you have those end products that go into your Targets and your Amazon, just regular retail channels. But you also have like your medical foods and beverages that actually go through like formularies for hospitals and kind of institutional environments. And those are really fun because then you get to educate the doctors, which the doctors know so much more about like the wide foundation than we even do. So when we're talking to them, they're like, oh, that does make sense, and then you educate them, and, hopefully they can educate their customer. But I know, like, when I'm at the doctor or the hospital, I generally, if they say something is going to make me feel better or heal faster, I just take it. So that's been a really cool, like, route that we've been going lately.
Do you feel like you're sort of more of a partner with your customers because it is such a close relationship where you guys can sort of workshop things together? Do they look to you for solutions like that?
Yeah, for sure. Especially if we're doing like marketing literature, that's definitely a partnership, because there are a lot of ins and outs of what you can say and what you can't say. So even with like a packaging claim, there's FDA qualified health claims, there's authorized health claims, there's structure function claims, and you need to know what level of substantiation you need and what process that company is going to need to go through, depending on what kind of claim they want. And the large companies, it's great too, because they usually have teams of people. They have their kind of technical marketing person, like my counterpart who knows some food science, some nutrition, some marketing. But then they also have just like regulatory folks there and lawyers, and it's really nice, just to make sure that the information is being conveyed truthfully, but also in a compelling way. If there's a story to tell, and especially with the smaller customers, they definitely, I think, benefit from, us sitting down, what are your goals? And then from there, we can kind of figure out what needs to be said and what is better left unsaid.
I think it kind of comes full circle to you in the beginning when you were at NC State and you were like, "Ugh, are people like, what are these packages saying? Is it misleading?
Yeah.
We can try to get people to eat healthy foods, but maybe they don't even know what they are." And now you're sort of helping create that language,
Yeah,
and verbiage to make sure that it isn't misleading and that they are, it is being relayed in an eloquent and straightforward way.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's probably my favorite part of the job, for sure. It's just really fun, and then to get to see a final product, even though I used to be able to like hold up a bag of potato chips and be like, I formulated the seasoning in this and I like scaled it up at the factory. That's cool. But especially with these more clinical products, to see something that's like, hopefully really going to be a benefit, to somebody's life, and just know the process behind that and all the work that's being done. And I will say that's not, always the case with dietary supplements.
They've gotten a bad rap sometimes.
They've gotten a bad rap. I think they've the industry in general has really tried to be truthful and straightforward. But every now and then, you do get some like bad actors out there making some wild stuff. And, luckily now it's like the whole industry is like I haven't gotten on the phone, but I've sent some emails to the FDA about things, that I see out there that I'm like, hey, this seems like a qualified health claim, this doesn't seem right. But yeah, I think the industry as a whole tries to stop that, but you always get some like cowboys out there. So if something seems too good to be true, just do a little research on it.
Because it's tough, right? Because we talked, like, again, back to the beginning, it's like there can be mistrust in things when you don't understand it. Mm-hmm. And especially anything that's chemical related or ingredient related, if someone doesn't understand that, they're putting a lot of trust in an end company mm-hmm. to really develop that brand that has that trust associated with it, so they can feel like this is going to be okay. This is good, right?
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. We're seeing a lot of like consolidation within the industry, which when you think consolidation, you usually think like, oh, monopoly, that's a bad thing. And like, it could be a bad thing, but I think in general, it's actually really good when you're looking at dietary supplements and things like that, because the larger the company, generally the more conservative they are with their claims, and the mm-hmm. greater amount of scientific research they need to even like put an ingredient in a formula, like, and so we're seeing a lot of that.
Especially with a Japanese company, by culture, tend to be more evolutionary.
Yeah.
Won't chase trends, won't do anything too wild, and are going to be extremely conservative, because like I used to work at a Japanese mm-hmm. company, and we're thinking in terms of centuries, not quarters.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And I think that can be that can make it difficult, to compete. Yeah. But in the long term, and especially for us, it has been really, really good. And it's been helpful. And now they're, like you said, thinking centuries. The stuff they're working on right now, it's like 5-10 years out, and of course all the sales folks want it like tomorrow, but it's the long-term plan, and it's really cool. I definitely count myself lucky to have like been able to have this experience. And then I've also got, my colleagues in China and India, and but it is different. Working for a Japanese company is different. Like nothing will ever be rushed or push through, which
Mm-hmm.
has its pros and
It's
cons.
pros and cons. I think especially with like a US culture that is so much the opposite. We don't
Mm-hmm.
have patience for anything. We're probably quick to jump on trends. We want to see results faster.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's probably an interesting, maybe it's a good balance.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's good. And also just the teamwork, everyone is kind of speaking, I've got my counterparts everywhere and we're all speaking to our market, and we're finding that out generally, one-on-one with customers, because it is, it's a top customer can be a large amount of profit for that year.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is very, very intimate. And although we do certainly try to group things and analyze things and look more big picture, a lot of it is relationship building and understanding really what they need. And so I love the fact that, like, I used to sit on their side of the table, and I remember my suppliers coming in, and you had the ones that you just, really appreciated, and you had the ones that were like, stop trying to like hawk your wares at me, like,
Yeah.
Peddle your wares.
yeah,
Get
very
outta here.
like salesy, like not. And so I hope that we're never, I'm like hypersensitive to that, because I'm just like,
Yeah.
don't want
You've
to.
been on
Not
both
being
sides of the table.
transactional,
Yeah.
but being value add relationship.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned a few times, you have to, with account based marketing, you really have to develop that partnership where you're working together as a team to deliver a complete solution. Not, hey, I'm giving you 10 pounds of this at
Yeah.
this price. It's not a, it's not a flea market.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, exactly.
So super interesting. We could probably talk about the technical side of it, especially fermenting, for way too long. But when you got into this space, you had a really interesting path to get here. But now looking backwards, if you could go sit down, have dinner with yourself, and we ask this question to everybody, but if you could sit with yourself at age 25 or age 18, pick one, what would you say? Like, what advice would you give yourself?
Mm-hmm. I think I would pick 25, because at 18 I was just floating around.
Yeah.
I don't even know what I was doing. But yeah, I think I would have to say that paths don't have to be linear, and that I know it's really good to have goals and things that you work towards, but I also think that people, especially like I tend to just love logic and reason, and want to kind of weed out all the unknown, and so you can kind of get tunnel vision from that. And also, when you're unhappy with something, you might stick with it for longer, just because, well, this is what you do. I'm a food scientist, this is what food scientists do. Or if there's something you're interested in, you might not take it because it seems risky and it might seem kind of outside your wheelhouse and new and scary. And I think I would just say that, it's okay to try things new. It's okay to take on, challenges and things that are a little bit outside the box, and that might lead you to exactly where you want to be, because that I love what I do now. I think it would be very challenging for me to find another job that had this unique set of like random skills. But I really think I got it because maybe, I don't even know, 4 years ago or so, our CEO was like, hey, our website, it's not very good. We really need somebody to redo it. And I'm not like tech savvy, but I thought, okay, I know what to say. I can at least write the copy. And it started from there. And then, because I was the application scientist, I worked in the lab full time and got to talk to customers sometimes, but it's, kind of taking that challenge and that opportunity by the horns, I think, is what opened up everything. And then they supported me to, just continue my education, get some digital marketing certifications, and just things that have been really, really, really helpful. So yeah.
I think that's really good advice, Liz, because people who are extremely driven, people like you, it's like, okay, here's my path. Here are the steps I need to take. And then you don't allow yourself an opportunity to look outside of that to say, oh, interesting. Like, what if I did that? And it would have been very easy for you, someone in the lab, just be like, oh, well, I'm a lab person. Like, I
Yeah.
don't need, what do I know about websites? But you looked at it as an opportunity, and then it helped you with this eventual technical marketing manager job. You're kind of parlaying all of your skills into one, you know?
Yeah. And it's so funny because I would have never, like, looking back, I can be like, oh, that's the moment
That's the
that kind
moment.
of things, started to change. But yeah. Yeah. And I think that's it's a hard thing to do in any, professional relationship, anything, like, to kind of just take a step back and be like, things are not permanent, enjoy the good part of something and don't be scared to take a little risk.
Yeah, it's a really good approach. It's like I think a lot of people, especially engineers, they look for that turn by turn navigation, and really you just need a compass.
Mm-hmm.
And like directionally, you can kind of find your way there. And like you had a great opportunity and you took it, and it's maybe different from your path. You thought probably you were going to run a lab or you're going to be director, VP of engineering at some
Mm-hmm.
point, and this is a deviation from it. But it's been a fun ride. That's awesome. This has been a lot of fun.
We have one last question, and it's really just for our own interest, and because I know I've gotten a lot of good podcast and book ideas, or even music recommendations. So, what are you listening to? If it's not a podcast, are you listening to good music? And then, what books are you reading that you would recommend?
Yeah. Let's see. I've been getting all my new music from one sole source for the past like 10 years, which is either sad or just speaks to how great this channel is. But I love XMU. That's like it's a channel on XM, and it's just like it's got some older like classic indie rock, like your Cat Powers and but then it's also got some new kids, and now they're like so young, they're like 17, 18.
You feel bad listening to it.
I know, it's like it's crazy, but it's good. It kind of keeps things fresh. And then I also listen to the channel right below it, which is just like 90s alternative, and you got your Cranberries and your Nirvana and
Living your best life.
Just classic. Yeah. Yeah. So for every new song I listen to, I probably listen to 20 that are not new.
It's all coming back though. Like now you're really cool listening to 90s.
Yay.
You're on trend now.
Cool.
My sister had a Nirvana shirt on the other day. It's like you're
How
not,
old's your
you're not
sister?
old enough. 19.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
She knows not what she's doing. Yeah. She doesn't know.
I mean, it's funny because born in 86, like I was not really listening to that at the time either, but I was like young enough that
recent enough.
It was
like
recent
in the
enough.
90s, early 2000s. Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
because he died in like 93, 94, right? So you're in it. It's
yeah,
not
I mean, I was like, I remember like
elementary school,
Smashing
middle school.
Pumpkins and Alanis Morissette on the playground. It's still good,
It's still great. More relatable now probably than on the playground. But
Yeah,
still
for
good
sure. I
jams.
used to be screaming those songs. I'm like, my mom was probably just like, psh.
She's like, what are you doing? What are you saying?
You don't know what ironic means. But
well, where can we find you? I think I see you on LinkedIn. Is that the place where if people watch this, they can just shoot you a message?
That would be great. Hi? Yeah, I'm on there. I'm on there probably more than I am any other social platform, which really says, hey, you're in your 30s or older. But yeah, definitely look for me. I also manage the Nitta Gelatin North America page. So if you write a comment on there, I'll write a comment back to you.
We know who's behind the keyboard.
Yeah.
No. Awesome. Well, it was great having you on the podcast. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you both. It was so much fun. Hope to talk again soon.